John, good to see you back in the UK. You've been reporting valiantly from Ukraine for almost up to 2 years in your trademark orange hat, so I'm pleased you brought that in this evening. You're listening to Kira Rudik MP talking there about what the funding would mean for Ukraine. That must chime a lot with what you saw.
Oh, this money is desperately needed. Number one, defence. We haven't given the Ukrainians anything like enough stuff to defeat the Russian killing machine. I'll give you an example. We've given the Ukrainians 14 Challenger 2 tanks, and they've knocked out 2,000 Russian tanks, and the Russians got 8,000 left. The tank factory, the Challenger 2 tank factory, is now a housing estate. Artillery, Europe, and I'm going to include Britain in Europe because Britain is in Europe, in my view. But we said we'd give the Ukrainians 1 million artillery shells, and we've given a third of that. The North Koreans are supplying the Russians with 1 million shells. Europe, with all its riches, is not able to compete with North Korea in terms of shell delivery. And the consequence of that is that the Russian killing machine is moving forwards at enormous cost to the life of the Russian soldiers, but Vladimir Putin doesn't care about that. He doesn't give a damn. Look just what happened to Navalny, etc., etc., etc. So the big problem is that in the West, our rhetoric is wonderful, but we have over-delivered, we have over-promised and we've under-delivered, and we are in danger of betraying Ukraine.
What do you make then of the bureaucratic tie-up, if we can even call it that has gone on with this 2.5 billion in funds from the sale of Chelsea Football Club? Reportedly, some of the argument is about which occupied regions of Ukraine it should or shouldn't go to.
I wanted, listen, you know, there was a kid who was killed by Russian rocket the other day who was wearing Batman pajamas. I don't know if you've seen the pictures on social media.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And that I've seen, you know, on repeat, the Battle of Kyiv, the Russians were saying we don't target civilians. And I saw in the morning after the Kyiv TV tower had been hit by a Russian rocket, I saw the people from the morgue take away an old man, a mum and her 5-year-old daughter. And I've seen the corpses with my own eyes again and again and again on repeat. So the idea that there are people in the Treasury who are shifting bottoms and moving their bits of paper around. Well, this enormous emergency faces Ukraine. First of all, the first priority is to survive and defeat the Russians. The second is to rebuild the country. And this money does not belong to Roman Abramovich. I mean, how can I put this in plain language? He's a crook and a gangster, so big no one dare call him a crook and a gangster. Oh, sorry, I just did.
Well done. Yeah.
But come on, get your act together. Pull your finger out, people. Give this money. I mean, the way they phrased it is good. This is for the good of people in Ukraine who've lost their homes. There's tons of them. Do it.
Do it now. Get the funds out. Look, Michael, on the point of football, did it take for, I know the re-invasion of Ukraine, but the onset of the real war in Ukraine for the last 2 years, for people to wake up and realise where some of the money was coming from that was owning football clubs in this country?
Yeah, I think it did. And by the way, I'm not chairman of the Manchester United Supporters Trust. I helped set it up, but I stress that because it's not fair on the chap that is.
Fair enough.
But absolutely right. I mean, Abramovich was allowed to take over Chelsea. Can't remember what year it was now, the early 2000s. And there was barely any comment about his associations with Putin. OK, at that time, we were a lot friendlier with Putin in this country than we are now. And indeed, he even visited this country at one point. But it was clear that that was tainted money that he was buying one of our greatest football clubs with. And now I think people are being a bit more careful about this. The Saudi takeover of Newcastle, there's been a lot more complaints about that. They were still allowed to do it. Thankfully, we've moved on in that way. As for the other points that, I mean, I can't disagree with a single point that John makes, which is unusual for me. But he's absolutely right. I mean, we have got to stiffen our resolve in the West. I mean, we've been pretty good in this country, but Europe and America are wavering. It must be awful for the Ukrainians, as Kira has shown, and we've got the huge uncertainty surrounding Trump's election. I think that basically on this particular issue, Sunak needs to get a grip and say, right, well, whatever it takes, we're going to do that right now, preferably with help from Starmer, because Starmer is going to be Prime Minister within about 10 months, possibly sooner than that, and he will have to, the case may still be going on then. So you can get agreement between the two on that, wonderful. But, there is a lot more that we can be doing in the West. And I think in the long term, we need to think about, we need to start rearming. Instead of, a cut in national insurance tomorrow, I think that the Chancellor, if he's got spare money, he needs to increase our defence budget. And we need to, this needs to be a long-term project, not just to help Ukraine, but to stop the expansion of this dictatorial, very nasty regime that threatens ultimately all of us.
Michael makes some points there, John. I got my tax summary last week, quite timely, and the money that Britain pays in foreign aid and in defence spending is right down at the bottom of the list. Could you see that changing with Labour?
I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I do. The problem is we need to start building factories to make things we've forgotten to make anymore. We've been passing for far too long the dividend from 1989. One of my weird political heroes is John Major, who, although I didn't like him at the time, out of office he's played splendidly. And what he said is we need to spend, just as Michael said, it's kind of weird for both of us as saying good on John Major.
No, I agree with you on that as well.
We should spend
Most
money.
Underrated.
We should spend money on defence. Yeah. By the way, I'm not a warmonger at all.
No.
But because I've seen dead kids killed by Russian rockets, I don't want to see my kids or even my granddaughter, and she's only 3 at the moment, but to end up fighting the tyrannies. And behind Vladimir Putin is Xi in China, and they're watching. But the great anxiety is that Trump gets in. And this is something that my Ukrainian friends, they're really worried about, again. But we're not doing enough to help them. We're not doing enough to police sanctions properly. And, we've actually got the money from the sale of Chelsea. And by the way, if you're asking, I support Tranmere Rovers.
I was asking, yeah.
So there is, and I'm not the chairman of the supporters club of that either. But as a good Tranmere bloke, I would say, give the 2.5 billion to Ukraine and do that now. I mean, I'd take you to the hospitals I've seen smashed up.
You would think it would be a straightforward vote win if that's what they care about, let alone the funding and the requirement that was needed.
We've got to be tough across the board. My other hero, apart from John Major, is President Macron of France. So never mind, The Simpsons talking about cheese-eating surrender monkeys. I'm going to have to say this. The thing is, the Americans are now, if I may put it like this, les singes qui mangent du fromage et qui capitulent. They are the Americans. I want to say to my American friends, stop it, because you're ending up being, as Homer Simpson called the French, cheese-eating surrendery monkeys.
Lily-livered, yeah. Whatever's being slipped into Macron's bourguignon at the moment is certainly strong. It is, because he is certainly taking a very hard line with Russia. Look, gentlemen, we're going to have to wrap it there. It was a fascinating discussion.